There's very little question about where the Atlanta Falcons are strongest on their roster, but the New Orleans Saints are uniquely built to neutralize that very threat. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Brightco. Brightco is jewelry and watch insurance made easy. You're able to get comprehensive, fast, and affordable jewelry insurance within like $5 a month, somewhere around there. So check them out today and use your special offer here for Locked On listeners so that you can get covered in less than 2 minutes over at bright.co/locked on. Once again, that is bright.co/locked on. On today's episode, I'm going to give you the injury report watch, right? What it is that you're going to be looking for from the practice participation report that can change the fabric of Sunday's game. We're also going to dive into the biggest remaining questions for the New Orleans Saints roster going into week one. But first, we have taken some time to chat a little bit about the Atlanta Falcons and where they're weakest or where they've gotten their weakest over the course of the offseason. But there's a particular position group where they're at their absolute strongest. And so I want to break that down too, because we should acknowledge that the Atlanta Falcons are still an NFL team and that anything can happen on Sundays. But the New Orleans Saints are uniquely built to compete and try to neutralize that very strength. And they're not built that way by accident. It's, of course, all part of the plan. So when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons, we've discussed that they got a lot weaker at quarterback in yesterday's episode. The day before that, we discussed how they've gotten a lot weaker at the second level. Really, the front seven as a whole, only 18 sacks last year, haven't crossed the 30 sack threshold in some time. We broke that down on Monday. But today, let's talk about where they're at their strongest, which is at pass catcher. And I don't know that there's really any other spot on their roster that competes with their pass catchers, particularly Kyle Pitts, and then, of course, the additions of Bryan Edwards and Drake London. Now, Drake London, we don't know who he is at the NFL level yet. We expect him to be #good, but we don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case. But he was a very talented receiver that did a lot more than just big guy doing big guy things while he was at USC. But is he going to be able to be that in the NFL is one of the reasons why I was down on him as a draft prospect over, in terms and in comparison to guys like Chris Olave and Jameson Williams, guys that actually have, a more versatile skill set, perhaps. But he was still very versatile nonetheless, right? He impacted games close to the line of scrimmage, downfield, all of that. So something to watch here in Sunday's matchup will be how is Drake London deployed and how is he utilized? That's, assuming he's healthy and able to go. I know he's been dealing with injuries and things like that over the course of the season. We'll get updates on all of that from the Falcons practice participation report, but also from Aaron Freeman in tomorrow's crossover Thursday of Locked On Falcons. But there are other additions, or there is another specific addition, of course, in Bryan Edwards, the former Las Vegas Raider who was previously a thorn in the side of the New Orleans Saints back in their matchup in 2020 in Las Vegas when he went off for, well, not a lot. I mean, it was 2 catches for 42 yards, but he was just a pest in that game. He had 42 yards. One of those catches was 20 yards downfield. The other one was 22 yards downfield. And then he also drew a 20-yard pass interference penalty on Marshon Lattimore as well. So he was just simply someone that gave the New Orleans Saints a lot of trouble in that matchup. And so expect them to go after or to look for a guy like Bryan Edwards, who's looking to find some success against a secondary that he has found success against in the recent past. Now, it's a very different secondary. You have, there's no more Malcolm Jenkins, there's no more Malcolm Jenkins. There's no more Marcus Williams. And of course, there's also no more Janoris Jenkins. You've got Paulson Adebo on the other side now, but still, he's going to remember how much success he had against this New Orleans Saints defense in the past, and he's going to look to revitalize that. Now, of course, we know not necessarily a new addition, but somebody else that has a major impact when it comes to the Falcons passing game is Cordarrelle Patterson. someone who gave the Saints trouble last year. He had the big 64-yard catch down the right sideline last year that ended up leading to the Atlanta Falcons being able to kick that game-winning field goal effectively for Younghoe Koo. And then, of course, there's Kyle Pitts, who combined in the last 2 games that he played against the Saints his rookie year last year for 3 catches, 70 yards. That's the most he did. Now, the Saints were mostly effective against Kyle Pitts, and they used Kyle Pitts a lot of different ways last year, having him run routes from out of the backfield, coming across the formation behind the line of scrimmage, crossing routes over the middle of the field, fly routes down the field, using him in line, in the slot, out wide. So he's a versatile chess piece, much like Cordell Patterson, that the Saints were able to pretty much contain pretty well last year because at every level, they had somebody that could defend him. And that's how the New Orleans Saints are built again this year. At every level, there's somebody that can defend a Kyle Pitts, and there's also somebody that can match up with these other receivers. If you look at where Kyle Pitts drew the most coverage last year, he actually drew a lot of coverage from corners, not necessarily in the slot, but lined up out wide and lined up in the slot during those 2 games. And so guys like PJ Williams, Marshon Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, and then of course your linebackers like at the time Quan Alexander, this year it will be Pete Werner. Those are the guys that were targeted most when it came to Kyle Pitts snaps. And I know that the Saints lost CJ Gardner-Johnson just last week, but he didn't really line up against or matched up fully on Kyle Pitts in coverage, but for maybe 10 out of 60 snaps that CJ Gardner-Johnson played against the Falcons last year. Remember, he only played 14 snaps in the first game because he had the injury, and he played 44 snaps in the second game. So that's really it, right? So I don't think that you've really lost that much in terms of your ability to defend Kyle Pitts based upon the trading away of CJ Gardner-Johnson. You still have Marshon Lattimore. You still, when he lines up out wide, Paulson Adebo when he lines up out wide on the opposite side. You still have Bradley Roby, who's an experienced slot corner and that can cover, big guys like tight ends and all that. We've watched it all camp. You've also got guys like Justin Evans who can be very physical with a smaller tight end like Kyle Pitts off the line of scrimmage. Same thing for or within 5 yards, not necessarily off the line of scrimmage. You're not really going to jam a tight end. But then you've also got Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus Maye and Alontae Taylor that can enter all these conversations as well. You've got guys at the second level that can cover tight ends like Deamrio Davis and Pete Werner. So the Saints are uniquely structured to be able to neutralize the threat of the pass catchers when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons. The things that they're going to need to make sure that they keep the most control over are going to be the mobile quarterback situation, which has given the New Orleans Saints trouble in terms of their defense and Dennis Allen's defense in the past. You're able to kind of go back and look at game tape in terms of what Arthur Smith did with Marcus Mariota back in 2019, which were a lot of, zone reads, a lot of, read option type plays, a lot of screens as well. So that would be something to watch. Halfback screens as well as tight end screens are all mixed into Arthur Smith's wide zone system. And then, of course, the run game. So if you can kind of protect against the big splash plays that can come from those things, right? 5 yards here, 6 yards there, fine. But you can't let them rip off the 13-yard screen followed by a 20-yard scramble and then a 3rd and 10 that you give up or a 3rd and 15 that you give up to a scrambling Marcus Mariota. Those are the things where the New Orleans Saints can struggle on Sunday. But in terms of the passing game, they're built to neutralize these pass catchers. And that's a good place for the New Orleans Saints to start. But they're going to have to get it done elsewhere as well on the defensive side to make sure that they don't end up having a disappointing loss to open up the 2022 NFL season. Now, there are some big questions that still need to be answered for the New Orleans Saints roster, including 2 spots on defense that are still drawing a little bit of concern when you break down the depth chart. Let's highlight those as well as the one place on offense you still should have some questions about as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get to that, I get to tell you about our friends over at Brightco, which is awesome because I actually really like what these guys do. So basically, Brightco is jewelry insurance, watch insurance for whatever it is that you need, an engagement ring, a really nice watch, anything like that. You see these videos all the time of people trying to propose on boats and dropping their engagement rings, or people trying to propose in sports stadiums and dropping the ring and it rolls down the, very, very steep. Like imagine dropping your engagement ring if you're trying to propose in the 600 section in the Caesars Superdome. That's the end right there. You're done. Your marriage over before it even starts. So go ahead and take care of all of those maybe concerns that you have by getting everything insured for like $5 a month over at bright.co/locked-on. These guys are awesome. They're geniuses. They made buying insurance for your engagement ring, your watch, or whatever so easy that you can get it done in less than like 2 minutes on your cell phone. You're not going to find better coverage, better deal, or anything like this that's more super affordable than bright.co. And you can find it at bright.co/locked-on. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again for joining us and making us your first listen of the day every day. We're going to do a couple of episodes throughout this week, still on the way. Nice kind of practice participation report and update for you will come this evening. Tomorrow we have our crossover Thursday with Aaron Freeman. I'll do another practice report update for you Thursday night, and then we'll get into some additional content on Friday. I'm traveling Friday to head to Atlanta, so I won't be at practice on Friday, but we'll still make sure that you have everything that you need at Ross Jackson Nola, and of course here on Locked On Saints. So I appreciate y'all very much for all the support. Here we are. It's week 1. And even though it's week 1, there's still some question marks when it comes to the New Orleans Saints roster. They moved a couple of things around. They added Jake Luton to the practice squad, a quarterback that came in just a few years ago to the NFL, who hasn't had the biggest and brightest career at all. But the New Orleans Saints are in a situation where they were looking for an emergency quarterback effectively to keep on their practice squad. So they find him and they bring him in. And in order to make that space on the 16-man roster practice squad, the Saints had an open spot on the 53-man roster, and a big part of that was filled on Tuesday by moving and elevating Chase Hansen from the practice squad into the linebacker room on the 53-man roster. So the Saints now officially have 6 linebackers on the roster, and we knew that eventually they were going to fill out that 6 linebacker role. The big question mark was just who it's going to be and whether or not it's going to be permanent, and that's where I want to start off our biggest questions on the roster for the New Orleans Saints ahead of week 1 is at linebacker. There's actually 2 spots on defense that we're still asking questions about. I'm curious if Chase Hansen is the guy that they elevate now and then end up cutting and then re-signing to the practice squad after week 1 so that they can elevate a veteran like Eric Wilson to the active roster without having to guarantee his contract. Remember, contracts for veteran vested players are no longer guaranteed after week 1. So if they were to move Eric Wilson up right now and sign him to the active roster, his contract and the guaranteed numbers sit there for the New Orleans Saints, particularly if they sign him at vet minimum. However, if they wait until after week 1, then none of that money is guaranteed. So bringing Chase Hansen up to the active roster makes sense for this week so that you don't guarantee a large amount of money or a larger amount of money to a vested veteran like Eric Wilson. And then maybe you make a swap with a guy like Zach Bond or Andrew Dowell or Chase Hansen after week 1. So the big question, though, is do the Saints have enough when it comes to veteran linebacker depth? I don't think so, but maybe that's not necessarily what they want. Maybe they just want depth. Maybe they really, really like what they have in Andrew Dowell and Chase Hansen and Zach Bond. And maybe they're looking at maybe the special teams angle of it all more than they're looking at veteran depth and concerning themselves with veteran depth. Maybe they feel really good about what that depth is. I don't know, but that will be one of the things that we'll have to watch throughout Sunday is do the Saints have what they need when it comes to this linebacker room? And I think that they're close in terms of the talent. I just wonder if the veteran depth experience in terms of the guys behind the starters is something that the Saints end up weighing after week 1 when those vested contracts are no longer guaranteed. Another spot where the New Orleans Saints can use a little bit of help is on the defensive interior. Now, I happen to really, really like what Kentavious Street brings you. He and I had a really great conversation in the locker room the other day about, how all of the different positions and techniques have to work. I'll share some of that with you later on this week, but he's wickedly smart. He knows how this game is won. He knows what it is that he needs to push other the offensive lineman across from doing, and he knows how to build a plan, and he knows how to kind of translate that plan. This is a guy that can line up from nose to end. I mean, you can utilize him anywhere that you want, kind of like what you had in Malcolm Roach, who's currently on injured reserve. So does Kentavious Street end up filling that role and get more snaps on the interior based upon how, or really just on the defensive line based upon all the different ways that he's utilized? Same thing with Tano Passanio, is somebody that we often talk about as a defensive end, but has that inside versatility as well. Then, of course, you have Shy Tuttle. You're set it with David Onyemata. You're just kind of trying to figure out who that guy next to David Onyemata is. And the Saints have shown that they have some interest in maintaining guys that can play a little bit of a nose tackle role. So you wonder, are the New Orleans Saints done at defensive interior, or do they look at guys like Sheldon Richardson, guys like Ndamukong Suh after week 1, who also become a part of that no longer guaranteed vested veterans contracts to get them to New Orleans to help on the defensive interior? There's still some potential additions that can be made there, but are the Saints in good enough shape right now going into week 1? We're going to have to find out once week 1 happens. Now, I would not be surprised, however, to see the Saints elevate Christian Ringo from their practice squad to the active roster as a game day elevation to not only increase their numbers on the defensive line, but to have another guy that's experienced in their system to be able to rotate in on the defensive interior. So watch out for potential game day elevations. My votes are probably Christian Ringo and then maybe one of the offensive linemen like Nick Martin. But depending upon the health at wide receiver, certainly you'd love to see Kirk Merritt get that call up as well. And that takes us over to the offensive side, where maybe your only question mark left on the offensive line outside of the development of Cesar Ruiz and Andres Pete is James Hurst and how he's going to perform at left tackle, right? Can the New Orleans Saints plug that left tackle role, not necessarily looking to get the same type of production that you got from a healthy Tyrann Armstead, but simply just making sure that you have an offensive lineman that can step in there and protect your most prized commodity in Jameis Winston and his blind side? That becomes the focus and the biggest question going into week 1, I think, on the offensive side of the ball as a whole, is that left tackle spot. There's a lot of belief in James Hurst, and it's all warranted. He's a fantastic player. He's not going to be Tyrann Armstead when Tyrann Armstead was at his healthiest, throwing guys out of the club on a weekly basis. But I don't think anyone expects that. What you're looking for is the best James Hurst you can get. And he's dealt with some injuries. He had the foot injury that he suffered during the second joint practice against the Green Bay Packers, and we haven't seen him since then. So now, as we get into practice and everything later on today, which we're going to discuss here in a little bit, that ends up becoming your big question on the offensive side going into week 1. Are the New Orleans Saints set at left tackle? Do they have what they need? And are they going to get the healthiest and best James Hurst available? Because if they do, then they're in a good position. And again, this is an Atlanta Falcons defense only had 18 sacks last year. Obviously, they've made some additions on the defensive line. Grady Jarrett is, another year more seasoned, all of those things, particularly on the interior. And so this isn't the most talented pass rushing team that you would have to deal with to open up the season, but you are only 1 week removed heading to the Tampa Bay, or having the Tampa Bay Buccaneers come to town next week. So you still kind of want to see everything shake out and work as positively as possible going into week 1. James Hurst is going to be one of those big storylines throughout the rest of the week when it comes to the New Orleans Saints and their practice participation. Let's break down what you should be looking for when the practice report hits later on today, and what are the pieces of news that can change the fabric of Sunday's game. We're going to get that to you here as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks, because today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy football the way that it should be, in my opinion. I'm not the biggest fan of the way that daily fantasy football and everybody else and the way that they're doing it. I'm not the biggest fan of having a salary cap. We're here in New Orleans. We don't care about a salary cap. Nobody cares about a salary cap. So get that out of my face when it comes to daily fantasy. Get all of this, I have to pick these players and then match up and go up against another thing, or I have to pick all these players and hope that they, end up out producing all of these other lineups. No, I want to use my football knowledge, not do everything by chance. That's what I love about Prize Picks. I can look at matchups, I can look at players, I can look at what it is that I need to know as a football fan and as a football analyst, and use that to my advantage. Because when it comes to Prize Picks, all you're doing is picking 2 to 5 players and then trying to project whether or not they're going above or below, more or less, than their Prize Picks projection. So do you think that, let's say, Jameis Winston is going to throw for 250.5 yards, more or less than that? You pick that kind of stuff based upon what you know about your favorite team, your favorite players, and your favorite game in the game of football. So there's just no better place to play daily fantasy sports than over at Prize Picks. So go and check them out today by downloading the Prize Picks app or heading over to prizepicks.com so that you can start playing daily fantasy sports the way that they should be. First-time users are going to be able to get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by using the promo code Locked On. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will match that, give you $100. You deposit 50, they'll give you 50. Don't forget to use that promo code Locked On so you can get that sign up done, and the deposit match of up to $100 at prizepicks.com. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, wherever you get your podcasts, on the Odyssey app, and of course on the Locked On NFL YouTube page as well. Today is NFC South Day. That'll be dropping a little bit later on today on the Locked On NFL YouTube page, and of course at Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, which you can search in the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Don't miss me and the NFC South guys having a ton of fun and all taking a lot of shots at the Atlanta Falcons. It was just relentless for poor Aaron Freeman, man. Like, we just didn't let him rest at all. All right, so as we look at the New Orleans Saints progressing here in week one, today's an exciting day. Regular season practice reports are finally going to be on the way. Injury reports, practice participation, all that. And of course, our first opportunity as media to view at least a limited portion of practice. We're also going to hear from, obviously, Dennis Allen throughout the week, all of that as well. But here are the storylines that you're tracking in terms of practice, participation, injury reports, things like that, because there are going to be some players that might be limited and things like that, are depth players and all that. But there are specific storylines that you should be following over the course of this week. So here's a little bit of a primer for you. We'll start with the biggest, which of course is Michael Thomas. As Jeff Duncan over at NOLA.com reported Wednesday morning, Michael Thomas was reportedly at the walkthrough on Monday. Now, we kind of talked about this a little bit on Locked On Saints on Tuesday, that Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith, and Marcus Maye were all in the locker room on Monday afternoon. So we don't know if that meant that he had participated, though. He could have just been there, right? So now we're getting a little bit of confirmation here from Jeff Duncan that he did actually participate, according to Duncan's sources, in the walkthrough on Monday. So that means you should expect to see him have some level of participation today on Wednesday. What you're really looking for by the end of this week is one full participation practice for Michael Thomas. That's what you're looking for. You're not looking for him to go full all 3 days. Don't be surprised if he's limited on Wednesday, limited on Thursday, and then full on Friday. All of that's fine. Like, they're going to ramp him up. That's been the theme of all camp, right? So if he goes full all 3 days, fantastic. But don't be surprised or down if he's limited Wednesday and Thursday. Really, Friday, full participation is the thing that you're looking for. So if you get one of those, then you know that Michael Thomas is going to hit the field week one. And it seems that everyone expects that. As we reported here on the show, there's been no real indication that he wouldn't be available week one. Dennis Allen has not skirted questions around, hedging whether or not he's going to be there or not be there, things like that. I mean, it seems that there's confidence that he's going to be on the field. And that's huge for the New Orleans Saints, even if he's mostly a decoy throughout the game and opening up the game for some of these other guys so he takes it easy a little bit, but not a bad secondary to open up your opportunity against with the Atlanta Falcons here. So if he gets one full participation in this week, at least that's a really good sign for Michael Thomas and what it means for his availability week one. Again, at this moment, I expect him to play on week one. I also expect Paulson Adebo to play week one, but you're going to be looking for a couple of full participation practices from him. We heard from him about a week ago in the locker room. He made himself available. He was all smiles, kind of talking about how he feels good about where things are going. Same thing for linebacker Pete Werner, another one that you're going to be watching. So these two key defensive pieces that are these young guys going into their second years that are expected to make this big jump in 2022. If you've got questions about their availability, you start to answer those questions today, right? So if you get limited participation from them both today and then full on Thursday, full on Friday, you're in a really good space. If you get one full participation from them on Friday, then you're kind of like, okay, well, let's see. I think that means that they might play, but how healthy are they? And then worst case scenario is that you see a declining participation kind of level over the course of the season. And that would mean, or not over the course of the season, but over the course of the week. So that would mean limited today, full Thursday, but then limited again on Friday, or of course, missing a practice would be something you'd be concerned about. But if you get two full participation practices, even just one, but you'd love to see two, then you're in a good place when it comes to Pete Werner and Paulson Adebo, both coming back from their injuries. Paulson Adebo is being an ankle injury, and then Pete Werner is being a groin injury that bothered him a couple times over the course of the offseason. And finally, the other thing that you're really looking forward to here is to see more about what we were just discussing over the offensive side, that big question at left tackle you're looking for James Hurst in his practice participation. If he's not listed on the injury report at all this week, you feel good. You feel really good going into week 1. Then you're just looking to see what the production is like once he gets out on the field. He knows the system. He knows the players. He knows the offense. He can run the zone runs and the gap scheme stuff. He can do all of it and everything. So he's experienced and he knows what he's doing. You just need to make sure that he's healthy and that he's able to get out there and again, be his healthiest and be his best self, because you don't have the top tier depth that you had with a Trevor Penning right now, right? You've got Landon Young that you can go to, who's splitting focus and time in between both tackle spots, but not the ideal situation like you would have had with Trevor Penning, while letting Landon Young continue to focus at right tackle. So a little bit of a split focus there. So getting James Hurst out on the field would be huge. And the practice participation reports over the course of this week are going to be really indicative of what Hurst's success could look like come Sunday in Atlanta. Okay, coming up later on today, we'll get you everything you need to know from New Orleans Saints practice in terms of practice participation report, who was there, who wasn't, some of the notable things that Dennis Allen had to say following practice as well. And then tomorrow we have our crossover Thursday episode with Aaron Freeman of Locked on Falcons, breaking down all of the biggest stories, key matchups, and of course giving you our predictions as well. And then we'll wrap up the week with what the New Orleans Saints need to do to win on Sunday. So we got all that coming up for you all throughout the week, and I hope that you'll be here with us every single way through. I appreciate y'all very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to make your second listen that Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Week 1 is right on the way, and if you're like me, you have a fantasy draft tonight because you don't like messing with preseason injuries before a draft. Forget all that. So let me go ahead and get my draft done late, and I'll be able to be all caught up with what I need to know thanks to Vinny Iyer over at Locked On Fantasy Football. So go and do yourself a favor and check out the show as well. Appreciate y'all as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, and for saying yes to me and the show. Remember, if you see me, say hi, and for everything that you need in between these episodes on your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up, let me know how the family's doing, let me know how you're living, let me know how you're momming them, and trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.